Hi, I'm Linda, and this is No Frills ASMR, and we're doing a little history today. I thought it would be really interesting to discuss the Hindenburg, or more formally known as the LZ 129 Hindenburg. And I think most of us are probably pretty familiar with the basics, but we'll try to go into some, a little deeper stuff. Maybe, I don't know. Hopefully there'll be something new to learn, or at least to remember. So this book I found at the library a while ago. It's called We Interrupt This Broadcast for a Special Bulletin, and it came with a CD, which I actually haven't listened to, but it has some neat pictures. So here's a picture of the Hindenburg, and it on the back, I don't know if you can see in this picture, it has swastikas on the tail fins there. And here it is making a little trip around New York City. And I do think most of us are fairly familiar with these images. So I am spoiling this right at the top, but I think most of us know. So we'll come back and look at this a little more after we're talked about it a little bit, because it is kind of interesting to look at those pictures. But the Hindenburg was built by Luftschiffbau Zeppelin. Excuse me, my German's not perfect, but I think it's pretty good. And it was named after Paul von Hindenburg, who was the president of Germany. And he was like a World War I, Paul von Hindenburg, he was a World War I don't know, general or something. And so he had become president of Germany. And he wasn't necessarily the biggest, he was very right wing, but he wasn't necessarily a Nazi party member or completely in agreement with the Nazis. But what he did do, I think, politically to stay in the good graces of people, was to appoint Adolf Hitler, as Chancellor of Germany. So upon his death, Hitler, and this is not a thing about, I'm not going to go into detail, this is quick, but Hitler kind of combined, and there's more to this, but basically combined the presidency and the chancellery, and created his office of Führer. So that's how Hitler became the power in Germany, was helped by Hindenburg. So that's just background on that. So the first flight of the Hindenburg, which was they'd call it like a dirigible, or, I mean, we think of it in the U.S. kind of like a blimp. I think it may have a little bit different from a blimp in some ways, but it was basically, hold on, I'll do my best to give you a really great likeness of it. But it was, hold up, I can do better. Kind of like that. And then it had like a propeller or something on the back, I don't know. And it had the little things that had Nazi symbols. And then right up here, there was a bank of windows. And I watched some videos of it, and you can see actual footage of it, which is really interesting. And so basically, it seems like the quarters for, it was almost like a hotel on board. And this is where the people were, up here, I think. But it was 804 feet long, so it's big. From here to here. And it had a 135-foot diameter. It was the largest flying machine of its time. And it was made out of rigid duralumin, which was like a type of aluminum alloy. And then it had 16 hydrogen gas cells. Now, think even then they knew hydrogen was flammable. This was no secret. And that helium isn't as flammable. But the US held most of the helium, and they weren't willing to give it to the Nazi party. Even though we have not yet entered World War II, remember this is going back to the 30s. But the US was like, we're not giving you helium. So they used hydrogen to, what's the word I'm looking for? Run this thing, right? And it had 4 diesel engines mounted externally on the back, or wherever they were. Actually, I don't know if they were on the back. I just know it had 4 external. It would cruise about 78 miles per hour. It could go up to 84 miles per hour, but it kind of depended on the wind and everything. And what it was doing was leaving on this particular trip. I think it was going from Frankfurt, and it flew over Europe past France, and then it would go across, and there was a little blip here. I don't know why. I looked at a map of how it flew over into, and it was going to land in New Jersey. So it was a, across the Atlantic, transatlantic flight. And at that time, most people were taking ships, which might take, 2 weeks. I don't know. That's not a fact. That's a thought. And this thing, I think it took 2 days to go over, which seems incredible to me that it would be able to push through wind and everything, seen, once you see what it looks like. But it did that. So, and there weren't really commercial flights for regular people. And I think the idea was eventually this could be for regular people to fly back and forth, just commercial. And at the time, it was expensive. It was like in today's money, it was like $9,000 person. And that was true of any kind of commercial air flight. But they were hoping to make it less expensive, right? Anyway, so they were flying across on a commercial flight. And on that flight, the final flight, there were 97 on board. 97 people. Now, there were 13 passengers and 22 crew. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I have some notes over here. I was like, what? That's not right. Okay. Out of the 97 on board, 36 people died. That's what it was. And 13 of them were passengers, 22 were crew, and there was actually one guy who was on the ground. I can never remember numbers. Okay. So that's for later in the story. All right. So the day they come in, hold on, let me get this map. Let's go to, we're right here, isn't that handy? Go to New Jersey. Okay. Can you see? I can't tell. Let's see. All right. So the area that they're coming into is actually down here. It's Lakewood. Lakewood, yeah. It was Lakehurst. Hold on. Lakehurst. It was Lakehurst Naval Air Station in New Jersey. I swear I looked up a map and I thought it was right here, so I was like, oh, that's it. Anyway, if I don't see it, because my eyes aren't that good, it's right around in here somewhere, I'm pretty sure. Lakehurst. Sorry, I thought I saw it there. Anyway, I can look for it later. But it's right around up here. Excuse me. So they flew in from Frankfurt. They actually came in that day and they did like a circle around Manhattan. And part of the reason they were doing this was that the Nazis had this Hindenburg at the 1936 Olympics, and they'd shown it off there, and they'd flown it all over above Germany to like show the strength of the Nazi Party. Because you have to understand, after World War One, Germany had been really decimated, and there was a lot of feelings that they were not as strong as they wanted to be, and people were really fighting for just their life. So the Nazis came in and were really showing off like their strength and everything to get the German people behind them. And once they'd kind of done that, they started to want to take these things out and about. So the propaganda minister of the Nazi Party was Joseph Goebbels. I don't know if I pronounced that great or not, but I think that might be right. And he was part of the reason they flew it over Manhattan, was to show it off to the U.S. and to really show how technologically advanced, that the Germans were. So they went around here, and then they came to Lakehurst. If I knew exactly where that was, I'd show you. I really thought it was right here. Oh, here it is. I found it. Okay, Lakehurst Naval Air Engine Center. So this must be where it happened. So they come down here, and they're going to land at Lakehurst. Now, it was kind of a big deal. So there were a lot of cameras on site, movie cameras. There were a lot of reporters. But in particular, there was a reporter who had come in from Chicago. His name was Herbert Morrison, and he was from Chicago Radio WLS. And you can listen to his broadcast in full. And he talks about taking a flight from Chicago to New Jersey in 2 hours. And he seems very excited by everything. He's just thrilled to be doing this. And he talks you through the landing of the Hindenburg. So, like I said, you can hear the excitement in his voice. And he really describes it and says, okay, it's coming in and it's letting out water from the ballast. And I think they were having some trouble because it was actually a pretty bad weather day. There was a lot of wind, and they were having trouble getting it to settle in. And so they let out, I think it was water. I watched a video like 4 different times to try to get it to the right, however they needed it. But then what they do is they threw down these like ropes, which was wild. And there are guys down on the land who grab them. And this is exactly what it looks like. So they grab these ropes. So that kind of lets you know how close they are to land when this starts to happen. So this part has already happened, and he's describing that. And then, and we can talk about why this happened and some other. Let me just take one quick side note because I thought this was fascinating. I was watching a video on the interior rooms of the Hindenburg. And like I said, they knew that hydrogen is highly flammable. And the reason I know they knew that is because on board there was a smoking room, because everybody smoked back then. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And the idea of not smoking your cigarette or your cigar would have been crazy. So they created a smoking room on board the Hindenburg, and they made it so that it had, I think it had like these rooms, a room you had to go in before you went in it. So it was pressurized, and they made the air pressure high enough that hydrogen couldn't enter the room. And they had to have a guard at the door to make sure no bigwigs walked out with their cigar in hand, or the whole thing would blow up. And they knew that. So it's wild. So they had a smoking room on board the flight. Okay. So they send down the ropes, and I think they were just like maybe 100 feet off the ground when it happened. I'm not sure. But it caught fire while landing, and the whole thing was destroyed in 30 to 40 seconds. And I mean, it's just sort of amazing that at that time, this event was filmed and photographed and broadcast live on the radio by Herbert Morrison. And if you listen to that broadcast, you can hear the trauma it's causing this kid. He sounds young. He sounds like he's in his 20s, probably. I don't know. I didn't look him up. But here's one of the interior dining areas, the main dining room. Let's see if they have him quote. So he says, "It's a terrific crash. There's smoke and there's flames. The fires are crashing to the ground. Oh, the humanity." And so that's where the phrase, if you've ever heard someone say, "Oh, the humanity," that comes from this crash. But if you listen to him, it actually kind of made me emotional just listening, because he can see. Now, mind you, there were 97 people on board, and 36 of them were, died. But a lot of the other people jumped. They jumped out, and not, some of them were injured, so they were on fire or whatever, or injured in the fall. But they were jumping out of here. So if you're standing there watching it, and this thing goes up in 30 seconds, like a huge explosion and flames, and look, this is how it looked, just like a skeleton of aluminum. And people got off of it, and there were children, and it was crazy. But yeah, you can watch the video of it happening, and you could separately listen to him. I mean, he wasn't narrating a video at the time. He was doing a radio broadcast. So they're kind of separate, but you can definitely listen to him. So in this book, it says, expert opinion is that a spark caused by static electricity, that's what I've heard, that maybe something about throwing these lines out created static electricity, and that could have been what caused the explosion. A spark caused by static electricity ignited hydrogen seeping from the ruptured gas bag. I just realized I've been talking like without breathing. I'm so excited by this story. I was like, all right. Regardless of the cause and the steps that may have prevented it, the catastrophe of the Hindenburg marked the end of passenger zeppelins. But even as Herb Morrison's chilling eyewitness report chronicled the end of one era, it signaled the beginning of another, an age in which electronic media would routinely report shocking events in the moment that they occurred. Yeah. So this is like one of the big major events that was really broadcast live and on air, which is why it sort of sticks around. A floating palace, near as large and as grand as the Titanic. I don't know about that. I watched a lot of videos that show you all the interiors. Yeah, it was kind of grand. It wasn't Titanic grand. But, okay. Oh, yeah, it boasted reaching America from Germany in an astonishingly short 2 days at the price of $400 at that time. American Airlines even provided connection service to the Hindenburg. Right. That's why the Herbert Morrison was saying he flew from Chicago to New Jersey in 2 hours on American Airlines, and he could have then taken the Hindenburg back to Germany. So it was a big deal. I have not read this. At the cost of more than $5 million, the Hindenburg was the largest airship of its kind, measuring 804 feet in length. Its gigantic framework measured 10 stories high, with catwalks and support beams traveling from nose to rear. Propelling the ship were 4 1,200 horse-powered Mercedes-Benz engines, supplied with enough fuel to travel 11,000 miles. That's pretty amazing. And permitting a top speed of 84 miles per hour. Wow. Just as a side note, there is a story, and I don't think it's urban legend. I think it's a real story, But it was Jimmy Page, and he was talking with Keith Moon of The Who and John Entwistle, and they were thinking about forming this super group. And I think Jimmy Page said, that's going to go over like a lead balloon. And they all thought that was kind of funny. So they thought about calling the group Lead Balloon. But then, they decided that didn't sound very cool. So they went with Led Zeppelin. And then they ended up dropping the, so it went from lead balloon, which is like not a good idea because a lead balloon would fall. And so it's code for like something that stinks, to Led Zeppelin. But then they were afraid people would say lead. So they just took the A out and called it Led Zeppelin. And that's how Led Zeppelin got the name. And I think that their very first album had that picture for the album cover, or something, not quite that one maybe, but a similar picture of the Hindenburg. Is that a true story? I don't know. So, yeah, there were 72 passengers and then around 60 crew. And they had dining rooms, and they had these cabins with bunk beds and running hot and cold water. There was like lounges and writing rooms, and then, like I said, the sealed smoking room. But one thing that was kind of reported about it is how, because it's not like an airplane, it just floats a little, So everybody said it was super smooth and quiet and very scenic, and that it could take off and people wouldn't even know that they had taken off. That's how like smooth and quiet it was. Oh, I forgot to tell you the dates. So its first flight was March 4th of 1936, but the flight where it exploded was May 6th of 1937. Now, Germany didn't invade Poland until September of 39. So this is a couple years before World War II has started. And the U.S. didn't get involved until December 7th in 1941. Never forget Pearl Harbor. So, so this is before, which is why it is a Nazi, labeled dirigible. And we're like, yeah, come on over. It's pre-World War II. Just as a note. So, and then I think this also was going to go to, or did go to, South America. In fact, in the year 1936, it ran a full year of service. The Hindenburg itself did. And it ran 17 round trips across the Atlantic Ocean. So it wasn't like this was one and done. I mean, it had been flying quite a bit before that, which I didn't know. That was news to me. I was like, oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, so most people feel like it was static electricity, and then there was like a little hydrogen leak, and that's what blew it up. But of course, there have always been sabotage theories, but I don't think anything's ever proven to be true or anything. It seems pretty likely it was just between the weather conditions and a possible leak that's what caused it. I mean, it's crazy to think a little static electricity spark could, but we know. And this would have been like a real luxury liner, All right. What else was I going to tell you about? I feel like there must be more. I don't know. Maybe that's it. Let's go back and look real quick at this and see if there was any other information here. So yeah, the first one in here is the Hindenburg, because it was kind of the first like live broadcast thing, I think. May 6th, 1937. Is that what I said? Yep, I did. Okay. So here are the pictures. Say the Hindenburg over New York City, the lounge aboard the Hindenburg, and the Hindenburg itself. I'm trying to see here where the windows, they must be right here, but that seems low. Or are they here? No, that's like the pilot. I swear in the video you could see windows. The Hindenburg was featured in German propaganda films bearing the Nazi swastika. let's see, having successfully made 10 round trips. Now I heard 17. Okay, so put a question mark by the 17. It says 10. Between Germany and the United States in its 1-year history, the landing of the Hindenburg was a wondrous sight. On May 6, 1937, storms delayed its arrival from Frankfurt, Germany into Lakehurst, New Jersey by 10 hours. The airship cautiously hovered over the mooring mast, waiting out the treacherous weather conditions before attempting to land. Yeah. It was approximately 7 p.m. when the landing lines were dropped to the crew below and the Hindenburg was carefully guided in. With the mooring only minutes from completion, Herb Morrison, the 31-year-old reporter from Chicago radio station WLS, was on the ground recording the landing. So he was 31. He sounded kind of young. But the landing suddenly went terribly awry as smoke and flames burst from the rear section of the Great Hindenburg. The flames spread quickly across the Zeppelin's shell, reaching through to ignite its hydrogen supply with a final crippling explosion. As the Hindenburg crumpled toward the ground, landing crews on the ground fled in terror, and passengers aboard the ship leapt to their deaths. In just 34 seconds, the ship was reduced to a twisted, burning heap of debris. 35 passengers and crew member and 1 victim on the ground perished in the blaze. 35. I said 36. 35 and 1 passenger on the ground. Okay, 1 person on the ground. Within minutes, local radio stations in New York and New Jersey were flashing bulletins of the crash. But it is Herb Morrison's eyewitness account of the horrifying tragedy that remains inextricably associated with the event. Overcome by shock and disbelief, Morrison began describing the indescribable. It's burning, bursting into flames, and is falling on the mooring mast and all the folks This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. It's a terrific sight. Oh, the humanity and all the passengers. Yeah, it's worth listening to him tell it because you can just hear how shaken up he is by the whole thing. I can't tell. It almost looks like he has a child here, but I'm not sure. Unbelievable. So there you go. There's the story of the Hindenburg explosion and where the Led Zeppelin gets its name and where the phrase, oh, the humanity, which basically is anytime there's something that's just, a dreadful disaster. People often say that. So there you go. We have a lot of other things. Oh, here's Pearl Harbor. I haven't used this book as much as I should. Operation Desert Storm. Yeah, if any of these interest you, let me know. I'll try to. Man Walks on the Moon. Martin Luther King. The RV Oswald Kennedy. Cuban Missile Crisis. Marilyn Monroe. John Glenn. Japan Surrenders. Atomic Bomb. Good grief. So many interesting things. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. So we have the Hindenburg. And it happened on May 6th, 1937. Let me move this real quick. Okay. And it was traveling from Frankfurt, Germany to Lakehurst, New Jersey. There were 97 people on board, and including the man on the ground, 36 people died. But the reason, or one of the reasons that it has lasted history is because it was one of the first events that was broadcast live and had lots of film footage of it. and you can watch it on YouTube right now, which is incredible. And it's worth a look at. You can see them fly around New York City, and then you can see them throwing down the lines. You can see the whole thing. It's really interesting. So, all right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. I meant to tell you at the beginning to please subscribe. That really does help me. And give it a thumbs up or a hype in the first 7 days. Or if you want to join the No Frills support crew, that helps support the channel so I can buy things like fun books to look at, or just for my time, which is a lot, actually. But I